We get started. Thank you for coming tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces out here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vic Wall. I'm captain of the Madison Police Department's West District, which we are in right now. Tonight is the fourth of Chief Koval's quarterly community forums, and the second West District forum, because we're so big out here, we need two of them. So, but this looks like the biggest turnout yet, so it's great to see so many of you out here. We have Captain Kristen Roman, who's going to facilitate tonight. And in a second, I'll turn it over to her so she can kind of go through the ground rules and how things are going to go. But basically, the chief will be here to answer any questions that you have for him. And if anybody has questions that are district specific, I'll be here as well to help answer them, as well as a number of other members of the West District. So I'll turn things over to Captain Kristen Roman, who can go through the ground rules for the night.
Good evening, everybody. So the way that we have found this to be most useful, so that the most people as possible have an opportunity to ask a question, or in some cases even just provide some sort of feedback or comment to the chief, is to limit the amount of time that people have. And I will also be kind of monitoring if we have repeat questions from individuals. So again, we can try to get as many people heard or able to ask the questions that they have as possible. Certainly if it's quiet and there isn't a flurry of hands up and people have additional or follow-up questions, we'll kind of be flexible and go with that as we can. The chief has brought with him a new device that I've not used before for this purpose. So
straight from Toys R Us.
So you all are going to be the guinea pigs for the facilitative tool, which essentially is a 2-minute timer. Okay, so after
not on me, on you.
It's all the time you want. So essentially, when the question's asked, I'll hit that. That'll be a nice visual for you. After 1 minute, it'll go from the green to the yellow, and then another 30 seconds it will go to the red, which lets you know you have another 30 seconds or so before, I don't know what it does if it makes a noise. Maybe it takes off like a rocket. But we'll work with this, and hopefully that'll kind of help give you a visual too, as long as it's not too cumbersome to kind of start and stop it. So we'll go with this and see if that's useful for people. So, all right. So we'll go ahead and open it up, unless the chief, you want to usually start with some comments, right?
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you all, especially with this single-digit weather coming out here. It really is a tribute to the community here at the West District. We have to get this obligatory shill stuff out of the way, this self-serving thing that Captain Wall has always ingrained in me. So you folks living in the West District, you comprise 24 square miles, and you have 85,000 residents. So if we were to sort of have you secede from the rest of the city of Madison, you would be, on your own merits, the 5th largest city in the state of Wisconsin. Yeah. So don't let that go to his head, because you want an increase as the 5th largest chief, probably. So at the end of the day, one of the reasons that we're going to sort of have these, and we have to do his in 2 segments, is that because of the expanding growth of the West District, that's one of the reasons, that's an impetus behind why we're looking at sort of breaking the West District a little bit into more manageable units by having that Midtown section, which would be down there by the corner of basically Midvale and Mineral Point Road, by the old Midvale Mount Olive Lutheran Church. Thank you. So that's ultimately in the background too for one of the things we're working on. But why don't we just start right now with questions?
All right. Who wants to kick things off with the timer? Who wants to be the first one to go? Nobody wants to do it.
I'll ask a question.
Excellent.
Okay, so if we could be theoretically the 5th largest city in the United States, how many police officers are in our little city here?
Perfect. Captain Wall, why don't you give them the breakdown of your numbers?
The West District, this year, we have about 90 people working out of the district station. And that includes me, supervisors, detectives, and patrol officers.
So at any one time?
At any one time, it's going to vary by time of day, or not day of week, but geographically and time of day. Every year we look at our workload, and then we allocate our patrol officers by workload. So at 5 in the morning, there's usually not a lot going on, so our numbers of officers that we have working are low, citywide, less than 20. Our peak workload time is actually about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so at that time of day, we have almost 40 officers working citywide. And in the West District, we have a good chunk of those, probably about 12 at those peak hours patrol officers. Which sounds like a lot, but you know, it doesn't take long for all those officers to get tied up on things. Just as a bit of perspective, when the West District station opened, a little more than 10 years ago, there were 58 people who worked out of it. And today, again, we're over 90 squeezed into that same space. So we're really bursting at the seams, which is all the more reason that the Midtown station is going to be critical for us.
Yes, sir.
Is the call officer on duty, that's who, like the neighborhood officer that are assigned to neighborhood?
The 12 officers at the peak hours is patrol officers. That's officers out in mark squads responding to calls for service. So obviously we have detectives, we have neighborhood officers, we have a community policing team, and all their hours are really going to be dependent on what their individual assignment is, because they do not provide the 24 hours, 7-day-a-week coverage that patrol services does.
Yes, sir.
Chief, as you know, about a month ago, there was a proposal that got a lot of press, got a lot of attention, saying, maybe we ought to, the solution to high crime in certain neighborhoods would be to have expel the police, as the proposal said. I disagree. Hang around for us, please. But let me get to my point. Rather than allow people with bullhorns or megaphones to determine public policy, why don't we put in the city budget, and this city is oozing with evaluation researchers and good survey people, why don't we do a citywide survey trying to determine just the level of satisfaction that exists. I believe for all, you know, the difficulties that police performance, you know, warrants, that people definitely want a working police department that goes out and catches bad guys and girls.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for your words of affirmation. And I'm glad that the officers are here that can afford to be here to hear that as well, because I think oftentimes if we are only dictating sort of how our community feels about it and only have the juxtaposition of some of the national narrative stories, you can get lost in that sort of bombardment of some very negative energy. And I think that that's very helpful to hear us feel validated, and I appreciate your comments. With respect to the neighborhoods, I was never intending or trying by any means to be disrespectful to those who are challenging us to lead. But when you use terms in phraseology of demands, and you refer to the officers that I'm privileged and blessed to command as an occupying force, then I have some concerns about that. I do think that we will forever be open and honest with looking at how we police, everywhere we police. But the notion of us literally, unilaterally pulling out and leaving neighborhoods to self-determination, to me, flies contrary to an oath of office that we would have taken as constitutional officers of the court. And one of those constitutional precepts, of course, is to provide equal protection to all. And I think that some false predicates got put into this neighborhood discussion in terms of thinking that the neighborhoods are over-policed. Madison, by its own City of Madison website, has over 120 registered neighborhoods. I've got a total now, as of February 1st, of 16 neighborhood officers. And 2 of those neighborhood officers are actually dedicated to Allied Drive because it is such a challenge for us even to this day. Now, the fact of the matter is that the neighborhood officers pride themselves on not being tethered to calls for service. They're not being driven by the dispatch calls. And in that sense, they can be much more relational in terms of getting to know constituents, getting an understanding of the underlying problems for that neighborhood, and beyond working about only crime prevention, crime detection, crime apprehension, they get to look at quality of life issues that are also besetting that neighborhood. So we've seen anything from neighborhood officers who are establishing neighborhood community gardens, to coaching various teams, to mentoring youth on computer labs, to all kinds of really novel things. And so when I said that we weren't vacating, I think that when people assume that contacts between the neighborhood and the police, there seemed to be sort of a pejorative connotation with contacts. So many of our contacts in the neighborhood are very relational, are at a very grassroots level, and have nothing to do with adversarial or confrontational sort of things going on. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm really pleased that we can do these neighborhood things. And the other thing that I should say about neighborhoods is that our whole phase, frankly, is to move those neighborhoods towards some measure of self-maintenance or self-determination. We did that at Broadway Simpson. We did that at Magnolia Cypress. We did that at Vera Court. We did that on Williamson Street. And we're doing that with Wexford. So when we look at sort of the various phases that a neighborhood can go through, the best hope we can hope is that at some point they will reach that sort of self-maintenance level, at which point we can take that asset, that officer, and move them to somewhere else where we can triage those issues greater. So the only thing that's really harder than getting a neighborhood officer for a neighborhood is to try to take one away, because the neighborhood really globs around that officer, and they come to be, as they should, the face of the department. The people who serve in our neighborhood offices all have enough sufficient seniority they can virtually go anywhere. But they're choosing to make a 4-year commitment to the neighborhood. And I think that speaks volumes about how they want to make a meaningful impact on what's going on in those neighborhoods. So thank you again. As I stated at the outset, we're committed to all of our neighborhoods, and especially the ones that are challenged by virtue of a lot of calls for service.
Yeah, I had a question, just a little bit of a follow-up on that. Thank you for adding a community officer to also neighborhood. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like him, I'm going to ask for police presence. But I have a couple questions for you. One is when there's a response, and I've been in the neighborhood 26 years, and it really has been quite dramatic, especially in certain segments here where we run down properties, criminal activity, and I don't know how many times, more times than I can count, I've heard gunfire in my neighborhood. I didn't hear that in 26 years. So the neighborhood, I think, hopefully is turning the corner, but still under decline. And a couple questions. I've had a couple friends and family members, victims of property crimes here, and they were told that it was juveniles. So there's very little follow-up, and also there is a perception that the district attorney, unless there's harm against the person, really little done with juveniles. Maybe released back to the parents or whatever. And then the second part of the question is, they've added a lot of officers, and we do see responses coming out of the precinct. They're very dramatic. A lot of cars come ripping out of there. They respond quick. I think the officers are very high caliber. No doubt about it. What about the idea, too, with the issue of their presence in the actual neighborhood? We've got certain areas, and you can probably name 5 streets in this neighborhood where 90% of the problems are. Could you have cars patrolling that a little more frequently when they're between calls, or can they do reports on their computers in their cars and near those intersections where drugs and things are sold? Because I think just the presence of the police car is a tremendous deterrent.
I don't disagree. I think that's sort of high-profile, high-touch policing where even in our downtime, where the officers are being caught up on reports, I would like them to maintain that conspicuous presence. I do think that that has some value as a deterrent. I don't disagree. I think what we're finding, though, frankly, is that the calls for service have gone through the roof, particularly west. And then once you get stuck in one spot, you try to move towards your center a little bit so you're not geographically out in left field, because you can go in so many different directions as it were. With respect to the first part of your question, I do think that there are some theories that we have some juvenile operatives, particularly last summer. But I think as you've seen over the course of the last month or so, some of that theory has given way to some other theories. For example, the conspiracy ring that they busted up that was housed on Maureen Drive, those were all young adults out of high school. And they were good for at least, what, how many counts are you guys up to on Maureen counting?
Still working at it, double digits probably.
Double digits. And the other thing is that we do see in some parts of Madison, and certainly West Madison is one of them, is that if you look at what is being taken, a lot of the quick and dirty portable stuff that's easy to barter out of the street or easy to pawn in American pawn shops. So we've got a lot of theft from autos and quick and dirty entries for burglaries for the purposes, quite frankly, of fueling some addictive behaviors with the heroin issues that we have in Madison. The other day I was looking at our end of year stats, and I believe that the police and fire department last year responded to 159 instances where Narcan was deployed. Now, the only time Narcan is deployed is when we arrive and a subject is pulseless and non-breathing, or basically deaf. I'm also proud to point out that 54% of the time we beat the fire department there. So I don't know if you were in there, but it is what it is. But, and so our officers typically start CCR resuscitation efforts, and thanks to the alacrity of our fire department, who has less than a 6-minute response time, that sort of continuance of the life, albeit maintenance at a most primitive level, has led to a lot of saved lives. Can you imagine, but for the Narcan, if we would have had 159 deaths in the city of Madison last year, I don't think we'd be talking to me about this being strictly a matter of public safety. I think we'd be talking about it as a public health epidemic. And perhaps some of you have seen that since last October, we also decided that we can try to do more. And when I say that, trying to do more, we trained all of our patrol sergeants to carry Narcan. Now, we don't have the same level of licensure or accreditation. We can't give a needle injection, but we found a nasalized mist inhalant that we don't have to have that level of accreditation for. And that has already resulted in sergeants saving 4 lives. And I'd like to put it in every squad car, but, and I think there's now some federal probes going on, Narcan has literally gone through the roofs in its price, since everybody understands they have a commodity that everybody wants, and now the pricing is crazy. But we're trying to get it to where we can work with the fire department.
And I agree, Narcan's a miracle drug, but my question on the juveniles,
okay.
I'm sure you answered.
Oh, on the DA's part.
Yeah, because in one case, a person had a car stolen by a juvenile, 16.
Thanks.
And they found out that there were really no consequences. Not a fault for the police department, but the DA's office. Don't carry any juvenile stuff unless it's super serious. Is that the case?
Well, I do think that because they haven't seen a significant increase in their personnel since 1980 or 83, something ridiculously crazy, they have had to do more triaging than probably is helpful to them in making good charging decisions where there's follow-through. So I do think that you might have a point in the sense that when you're sort of forced with this glut of cases, something has to give way in the grand scheme of things. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. I think the DA would tell you that he wishes he could do more active, aggressive prosecutions, but for the fact that they are so pinched for a prosecutor.
The problem when you don't deter the juveniles, though, then they become worse criminals, and then you do deal with them when they're home and murder or shooting. That's my thought.
Understood.
We have here, and then next to you, and then you, and then I'll come back. It's about all I can remember at one time.
Hi, I'm Krishna Ralston. I'm the president of the Meadowood Neighborhood Association. I think I've spoken with you on the telephone. In fact, I've got a couple of questions here. One is in terms of would you speak a little bit to what kind of sensitivity training the police officers get? Clearly, most of the police officers are white. We're beginning to have a more diverse population in this area. And I'm talking about sensitivity to everybody. The white people, the African Americans, the Latinos, everybody, and what kind of sensitivity training, not just the new officers, but the officers who've been on the beat for a while. So that's my first kind of question. And then the second question, and this has to do with, if you can just say a few words about this, what we're doing here in the neighborhood in terms of the liaisons that we've set up between the police and the neighborhood. And our neighborhood officer, who's great, Craig Knudsen, although I'd like to
Craig
hear
is your mom?
what his I want to know what his sensitivity training is too. And
I'd like to see his
so
too.
how issues like that.
Okay. I'll try to trace it. I may have to help you early on.
Okay, my name is Sheree Wallace, and I'm a Meadowwood community leader, and we welcome your liaison office, and Newsom is the greatest officer. And I get a kick out of stopping the police. You know, so many people say the police is not approachable, this and that, but I can't say the West District. I get a kick out of stopping your officer. So Meadowwood, we appreciate the West District. We welcome them, and you can put how many polices you want to over here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to have a few police plants here today. To your question, first of all, I really don't think I can get to the starting line of training if I didn't do a service to say about the kind of quality and character of the people that we're recruiting, which is literally a nationwide impetus. Right now, my class of 15 is very reflective of what you'll see in any given MPD class. The average age is 29. They have a bachelor's degree. A quarter of them have a master's degree. From the diversity standpoint, the Madison Police Commission personnel are 20% people of color, which typically meets and exceeds a lot of the most recent census data figures that I've seen put out by the Division of Civil Rights by our own city agency. And in terms of the kinds of people that we're attracting, a lot of them, because I think it goes to the sensitivity you have when you're willing to move past your comfort zone. A lot of them have a second language capability. Many of them are intrepid travelers worldwide. We sort of lead the country in a sense in that if you look at policing, whether it be federal, state, county, local, municipal, women represent only 12% of the workforce. Madison is one of the leaders at over 30%. So those are the folks that are coming. And by the way, it's very rare to see a class that has more than 2 or 3 that have a criminal justice major. I'm a recovering journalism degree. You might have been what? Social?
English.
English. She definitely had to get a job. Renting cars or Enterprise or?
I was a corporate sales down in Chicago and budget rent-a-car.
She was renting cars. So, not that that's not a worthy pursuit, but what I'm suggesting is that we're not all cut from the same cloth, and I think that that's important before you go into the training. So now, in the training itself, there is a 520-hour core curriculum that the state promulgates, which we have to adopt. But then we can supplement and often do. So with the area of cultural competencies, sensitivity training, we well exceed that, and we supplement it with groups like 8 hours of unconscious bias. We have, for example, in my law class, as an opportunity to understand that the powers of discretion or abuse of discretion are also significant. We have a professor come in who leads the Project Innocence at the law school to talk about the implications of wrongful conviction, many of which is through misidentification practices contributing by the police for undue suggestiveness. So we are trying to do that, and the same curriculum in terms of the fair and impartial policing, aka the unconscious bias, we're giving that to our officers too. as a part of their annual training, they have to have a minimum of 24 hours ongoing education. Typically, we're closer to 32 as an agency. But we don't just use that time for things like firearms and defensive tactics. We try to supplement with as many of those topical issues as you've been told, because we recognize that's what the community expects of us, and that's what we have to do a better job of delivering. So a lot of the time is spent with that, and in terms of dealing with professional communication skills, ethics, and I think, as I mentioned to you, when we teach the law, the norm across the country is a law in police instruction academy. You usually start with powers the police have. In Madison, since I've been here for the last 20 years, we start with the limitations. What are the limitations of the police powers? I'll give them those skills they need to do the job and to do it well, but I want them to come away from the experience and throughout understanding that you're only a police officer 8 hours of the day. And I hope, for goodness sakes, the other 2/3 of the time, you cherish the same fundamental constitutional rights and individual liberties that we want to ensure everybody has access to. But that's just a little bit. On your second part of your question, was it to the neighborhood officers?
Right, yeah, specifically what kind of training they get, and I don't know whether or not Officer Knudsen or somebody else would like to come up and talk about that.
Well, actually, I'm going to call on Lieutenant Mike Hansen back there, because
Good.
he just did another 8 hours of training for our training officers, for those who want to do that. So besides the sort of on-the-job training, they'll get cross-pollinating with people who've done it before. Can you talk about some of the other curriculum that came into that?
So we have our neighborhood officers here in the West District, and they all went through 8 hours of specialized training for a neighborhood police officer. As the chief mentioned, they're not call-driven and patrol. We want boots on the ground in the neighborhood. So they just went through that in early February.
And who does that training?
That was in-house. That was by our staff, our command staff, along with a community member, and she's running for office in the South Side, without mentioning her name with the primary, but not endorsing anyone specific. But so they had 8 hours of training there, and then once a month they have a meeting in the South District where all sorts of topical issues are brought up, from nuisance abatement to various laws that we're working on or that they're responsible for in the neighborhood. We can have any topic in there, from diversity to tactical situations, whatever it might be for that time that they're meeting once a month. But one of the things that we're doing that's really important over the next 3 weeks, starting next Monday, and the chief leads us off, is what rolls off our tongue in the police nomenclature is Terry stop, contacts, probable calls, all those things that roll off our tongue quite easily because we've been trained in it. But when we're in a challenged neighborhood, people get their perception of the police through Hollywood. So, and that hurts us sometimes. So what we're doing over the next 3 weeks, instead of bringing our Citizen Academy to the hoity-toities of the world and the media and everybody else, we're going right into the community. And we're trying to educate people on how we do our business with laws, policies, tactics, and everything else. And the goal is not only the education part, but then in the spring and summer when there's more people out and active, they understand why we do our operations, what we're trying to engage in, and how we're trying to relate to the community. So it's on the forefront of our thought process, Krista, and we hear it as a command staff weekly through emails and everything else, and we address it as issues come up.
One thing that people should be aware of from the training, the state requires 520 hours. Our pre-service academy is in excess of 800. And then after the 800 is done, then they go on a 4.5 month field training one-on-one. So when you see cars riding double, it's not a rough neighborhood. It's a veteran with a rookie. And their job is on a one-to-one basis, take those lessons learned and try to apply them in the field. And so you won't see a solo practitioner from our training academy until a full 9 months have gone by. So we want to get it right. We want the quality control and assurance to be there. The other thing that I think is a real signature of the Madison Police Department, I'm going to toot your little horn here for a second here, is we do an excellent job of doing professional communication coupled with crisis intervention strategies. Whether people have a substance abuse issue or a mental illness, we couldn't be any happier, more proud of the fact that we're now having 5 dedicated officers pulled from patrol to do nothing but preemptive work at each one of the districts, trying to help us do a better job at connecting providers with loved ones who feel like that significant person in their lives is falling between the cracks. And it's proven very instrumental. And Captain Roman is the commander of that unit, and in addition to those 5 you see, I just want you to know, it's not like everybody else in the room is basic cable. All of these officers that will meet you at your door are premium trainees in crisis intervention and mental health tactics. It's just that because of that incessant call for service drive, we can't necessarily spend the kind of time and resources we'd like. So even before getting these 5 neighborhood officers, well, they're basically like a neighborhood officer, 5 district officers doing nothing but mental health. We have a cadre of about 18 to 20 who are also scattered throughout the district who have additional training because it's a passion, sometimes because they have a family member that's afflicted. In any event, they're motivated to jump these calls, do more with them, and they volunteer to do more after their calls are done. So I think that's the sort of the neatest part about what we're trying to do.
Okay, that brings me up to the idea of
I'm
what
sorry
can
to
we
interrupt.
as a neighborhood association.
I'm going to interrupt you because we've had several hands pop up, and I think
Okay.
Oh, she's being a trained
2
facilitator.
questions from you. Can you come back to you? I'm
I'll
sorry.
come back to the question about the neighborhood association and what we can do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Yes.
I do want to commend the police department because all of the experiences I've had have been positive. But I think there's a couple elephants in the room we ought to talk about. One is poverty. We have 1,000 homeless kids in Madison, and half of our kids are eligible for free and low-cost lunches. And poverty and crime and poor mental health tend to go together. That's one issue.
And not optimizing our education.
Yeah. And the other thing is, according to the race equity study that was done by the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, Wisconsin has the worst racial disparity in the criminal justice system in the country, and Dane County is the worst in the state. We are all responsible for that. And, you know, when I look at the numbers, I think blacks are 50%, are 6% of the population. In the Dane County jail, they're 50%. There's something wrong. And so I'd like you to address those issues of how the community does deal with racial disparity and the police as well, and also just the problems we have in the criminal justice system.
Sure. Well, that report, from 2 years old now, a little over 2 years, has literally been a rally cry, not just for the community, but in particular for the police department. Because certainly we are a part of that problem. So now the challenge is how can we be a part of its solution? And I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge at the outset of your remarks that above and beyond us doing the call and response to crime activities, there are also many other factors within the infrastructure of education, increasingly sort of some habitability issues, and that's why some of our neighborhoods are being extremely taxed because of what people can or cannot afford to live in America. The poverty issue, you're right, we have 27,000 students at MSD. By the district's figures, 50% are subsidized for those economic lunches, and in some districts it's as high as 65% as far as some schools. So all of these form a consortium or a perfect storm or disaster. Now, what we have to obviously double down to do is ensure that, first of all, to her point, are we hiring people who have sufficient character, ethics, and morals, that they are not going to be sort of brought in or brought down by cop culture? I was pleased as a recovering FBI agent myself to see that the director of the FBI, for the first time in ever, actually make a statement on a controversial subject. I commend him for doing so. And he acknowledged, as do I, that there are those issues, occupational or otherwise, that we have to be constantly mindful of and probative of. Unconscious bias, the culture of nights, where you see all of your contacts are typically dealing with, after midnight, a lot of people are drunk or high on something, and you start to lose patience, and you have to have people who are watching you as you watch others. There have to be sufficient checks and balances to ensure that we don't have those sort of rogues. And when rogues come up, we got to run them out of our department. So we need to also look at what is it, though, that is intrinsic in the way we police, that even though we don't think at one level that we're doing anything wrong, does it have a de facto or some sort of unintended consequence because of the practice? That's something I think we always have to be mindful of, and I think we're trying to do just that. Your figures are absolutely stellar, spot on in terms of those sort of disparities. But one of the things that, going back to sort of these neighborhood issues, is that I think an awful lot of the rhetoric thus far has been focusing on the police in terms of who we are arresting. And I don't even want to go there for a minute, because I like to always look at paradigm challenges. And I want to say that out of the 6%, 6 to 7% of our community is African American, I'm just as taken back by the fact that when we look at Part 1, violent crimes, that 34% of our victims are African American. I don't want to forget victims in the grand scheme of things, because we are spending a lot of time talking about who it is that we're arresting, but I don't want to forget victims as well. But at the end of the day, I think we have to continue to ask for the community for those sorts of things that help us help ourselves. So when we have people who aren't being treated appropriately, I need to know that in real time. Those need to be reported. Those need to be vetted, investigated, and appropriately dealt with. And then we do have to look at some of the systems that are going on. One of the things I'm excited about is that later this month there's going to be a restorative court initiative put out on the south side, and that's chiefly going to be brought about by officers in the field that are in the South District. So let's say in particular where we have the most issues is that 17 to 26-year-old group. That's where a lot of these contacts, adverse consequences are occurring. In that pilot project, when an officer has something that would be otherwise diagnosed as a misdemeanor, a simple theft, a battery, a retail theft, something like that, the officer can take the name, take the information, and then basically say, I'm ordering you because I have probable cause to believe a crime was committed and you committed the crime. I'm ordering you to show up at the Villager Mall in 3 weeks' time. And you're going to go before a peer court, people from the community. And in that interim period of time, we're going to see what kind of occasions there has been for adverse context. This is someone who's never otherwise been involved in the criminal justice system. Those cases are going to be plucked out of midstream. No one's going to be booked. No CCAP entry is going to be generated. They're going to be ordered in 3 weeks' time. And in that interim period, Ron Johnson and all those other people working with this county and funding grant are going to see, what is it that made you have that first harmful impact? Is it because you're falling out of school? Is it because you have an AODA issue? Is it because it's a question of joblessness? And they will do their best to try to find some sort of wraparound method to see if we gave you the resources that our community has to give, might you not have taken that first harmful step? And the community will have an opportunity to speak what's appropriate accountability. And if they then meet out what the community expectations are, do you know how profound that would be? Because this would be the first time that no one would be booked with a CCAP. CCAP, I know a lot of us are always on there, but you know what? CCAP does a great disservice to people of color in particular. It inhibits your ability to complete a job, to look for work, to get employment opportunities for school. And a lot of CCAP doesn't flesh out the fact, or people don't care that it was dropped, it was dismissed, or it was a forfeiture, or. All people are interested in is the sexy part, is who got arrested for what. you really need to look at the resolution of these cases to be fair and to have some integrity. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of disingenuous employers and others who just look at CCAP for what you're arrested for. They don't care about the dispositional code. So we're working with the state bank of courts. They're waiting for a new state administrator, but we've been in touch with the Chief Justice to say we want to work on at least eradicating the dismissals and the forfeitures from those CCAP entries. We need to work more on those kinds of institutional issues that contribute to the crowd.
Yes, sir.
Chief Koval, I caught your presentation at Sequoia Commons, and I was blown away, to be quite honest. You know, you're so thorough. All of your people are so caring, just so educated. I think, you know, the job of police officer. 5 years ago, I walked the streets in Meadowwood with now Lieutenant Hanson. He wasn't lieutenant then, but and I saw the good that he was doing there with the people, many of whom maybe don't have the family structures that we grew up with. And I learned, it was last week at Sequoia Commons, that you're looking at Mount Olive Church, buying that for a district, another district office. Is that on Midvale? Or right about,
It's on Mineral Point.
Mineral Point Road, yeah. Yeah. And I think, if I recall correctly, 4 years ago, Madison Urban League was looking at buying that for Madison Prep. I think I've got the same. And I was just struck by, you know, the conversation now in Madison is a little bit diametrically opposed to what they were talking about with Madison Prep. They're talking about being college ready, aiming at minority students, high expectations. You can do it, you can achieve, it's up to you. They're going to have a longer school day, a longer school year. Now it seems that I caught the question from a young and gifted fellow last week, I don't know if he's here today, asking what you can do to keep people out of jail. I kind of wanted to say, what can he do to keep people out of jail? What kind of message can he send? I just still feel that Madison missed a beat by not having this high expectation standard. And now it seems like we're talking about lowering standards because maybe not everyone can meet those standards. I just think that's a very defeatist message. And I think it's wrong to try to accuse police of being the problem. I think, you know, and we talk about Sheriff Mahoney in his jail, he wants to make it a mental health treatment facility. And I think that's to the good. Or treat AOTA, alcohol and other drug abuse. If someone commits a crime, there's a problem there. Like you said, there's a victim. Two victims, really. The perpetrator and the person against whom it was committed. And it seems to me that person needs help. And he can get help in Dane County. I often say, somewhat jocularly, that you folks, the police, are like the intake people for the Dane County Human Services system. You connect people who are in dire straits with the help that they can get. And so I support what you're doing, and I think, I hope I'm not alone, but
I hope so too.
Yeah. I really do, and it's the toughest job in the world.
Well, you have a lot of profound things in that narrative, and I appreciate it, but we really do want to cultivate, quite frankly, as part of the selection process, is that if you're just in it to be John or Joan Wayne, we don't want you. We want to filter you right out the door, because I want people that are unapologetic about the fact that we really are social workers with more legal authority to do things. And frankly, it's an awesome and daunting challenge, one that we should hold as a sacred vow. And so I do, you know, people say it's sort of so pithy, but I do believe we're social workers with a badge. And the sooner you come to terms with that, I think the better your career will be for you, acknowledging it.
Chief Koval, my name is Dave Glomp. I'm the co-liaison for the Meadowwood area in terms of interacting with the police department. And before I ask my question, I want to say that I'm very impressed with the West District and with you in particular in selecting your creation of new task forces, one on burglary, one on other crimes.
Violent crimes.
And the fact that we've got a drug task force in this city. And those are all very positive things. And I commend you and I commend the department for that. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask the question because of a number of what I guess I would call random weapons violations, shootings, what have you. There's a growing concern in this neighborhood, and I would guess across the city, having to do with the possibility that there will be some collateral damage with these shootings. And I wanted to know if, number one, are gangs involved with that? Is it drug addiction, or is it both? And exactly what is your plan to address this so that we can stem the number of drive-by shootings? And we don't want anything like what's happening in Milwaukee and Chicago to occur in Madison.
Thank you for your kind words. I suppose I could spin here and say that if you looked at our population vis-a-vis comparably populated cities, that we are at the low end in terms of crime. But frankly, I think that's sort of specious on many levels, because the fact of the matter is I grew up in Madison. And I started with the Madison Police Department on July 11th, 1983. And I can tell you that your perceptions are spot on in terms of the increase in gun violence. That is not something that we can ascribe, discount, or minimize. It's very real, it's palpable. And I always say the story, sorry for those who've heard it, but when I started out, it's still a 6-day on, 3-day off rotation for our officers. And we have 3 different color rotations, and it just works that way all the time, 6 days on, 3 days off. And I can assure you that when you hear the alert tone sounds across all the channels, that whatever channel is working for protective services, and no one talks because the dispatcher is going to tell you about a crime in progress that typically involves a weapon. And I can tell you that in a 6-day rotation, you could get 2 or 3 of those alert tones that would sound in a week in a 6-day rotation. When I do ride-alongs and try to make myself feel relevant and material again and ride a patrol beat, it's not at all untoward that these officers will hear that alert tone go off 2 to 3 times in an 8-hour shift. So that is not just, you think about it, that is happening perception-wise. Specifically to your point about over the holidays in particular, I think we had a total of 7 shots fired incidents over the course of 8 or 9 days, something like that, Captain. In that instance, you're right, it was gang-related in the sense that these folks, for whatever reason, whatever motivation, whether it be a girl, whether it be a beef, whether it be, who knows why people would be so motivated, but you're right. They're shooting at one another. This is not the consummate stranger versus stranger at all. But I worry to death that I'm going to be the next Chief Flynn and have to talk about some grandparent who's sitting with a grandchild on their beckoning knee and gets hit by one of these fools that lets a round go off. So that's one of the reasons I think that we're sort of doubling down with a sense of urgency by creating a violent crimes unit, because we understand these things transcend the district lines. We want to be more nimble. We need to put a greater premium on real-time intelligence as it's coming to us from the districts. And a big linchpin in the instances that we just described are our 5 gang officers. You know, the first and foremost thing is that our gang officers are trying to do intervention to recognize those kids who are sort of getting missed, falling off a path, and seeing what they can do, working with school, working with the neighborhood officers, working with the families to see if we can't sort of right the ship. And they try to get to know the kid, and they try to help kids who are in the life who want to get out of the life. But for those that they can't preemptively help, or those that they can't help out of the life, they're giving us real-time information on what the agendas are, who the people are, and who's likely to be involved. And they're literally, When I ask them stuff, I feel like I'm watching a television show surrounded by savants. They know everything about these folks, right down to tattoos. I mean, it's incredible. So those folks have become instrumental to us in the violent crimes unit. And I think, at the end of the day, we really need to be worried about this issue. People always say, why don't you spin a happier tale? And I think that, frankly, I have to sort of be the canary in the coal mine. I think one of my responsibilities is to say, we've got some problems in here. When I was a younger police officer, God bless him, I considered Chief Cooper a mentor for life. But I thought at that time, when he sort of minimized the fact that we were having gangs coming into the community, he chose as a matter of public safety to sort of, I think, to sort of keep people in check and not go off the deep end. His heart was pure. But I tend to be more like, if we have a problem, we got to acknowledge the problem first in order to start making some inroads in addressing what we have to do to rectify it. So I'm optimistic because of the people I have and the passion they bring. But to your point, that's not an aberration, Doug.
Okay, I have a question. To piggyback off of his, not only how can the police help us, how can the community help? Because I have family that are from Chicago, and they're targeting little kids and having little kids target little kids. And my only thing is, I have a little one myself. I even have a little brother who's 11, and you're looking at, I've got a couple people that might be targeted. How do we help them, not just in the household, but outside the household, so that way we can let them know that that's not the way to go. And you have other things you can depend on to make your life better instead of going down that path because you think that's it.
The fact that there are people willing to stand in the breach like yourself and mentor kids like this and to coalesce with other parents in similar streets means all the difference. It really does. I don't mean to be sort of so axiomatic about it, but it really does take the community to raise our kids because we have a lack of mentoring. There's a void there. And the schools can't do it unilaterally. The police can't do it unilaterally. We need to have the help of faith-based groups. We need to have not-for-profits. We need a lot of people on the same page. She's tracking after us. But it is going to take a coordinated community response. A lot of times we see the Madison experiences, we have a lot of folks filled with altruism, which is wonderful. But I see a lot of people going down independent paths to administer their Good Samaritan deeds. We need to do more comprehensive coordination of that in order for us to make sort of a unified front. But at the end of the day, you also need to enlist those officers that are in your neighborhoods. Even if you don't have a neighborhood officer, there's liaisons to every neighborhood in the West District.
I said we just actually bought our house.
Terrific.
We are actually new to the entire neighborhood. So.
Terrific. Welcome, indeed.
And then my name is Barbara, and I've been working with the Maple Prairie Neighborhood Association for 23 or 4 years. I got it to get started. But when I first got in there, people took care of their kids. When there was a problem, you went to your neighbor. I was just talking to this lovely woman, and she was saying that some kids threw rocks at her door, that they were 9 years old. And when my son was a lovely 7-year-old child, a little 9-year-old, he came and said, why don't we put some doggy doo-doo in the neighbor's mailbox? And when I found out about that, I said, okay, now we're going to go up, we're going to write a note and apologize for doing that, and go up and give it to the neighbor. So we need neighborhoods neighbors to talk to the neighbor rather than always call the police, because you need to know your neighbor.
But we need both. We need both actually in real time. We need to have neighbors be sort of nosy busybodies again. Because everybody assumes, well, it's really none of my business. There's a certain element of detachment to that. I'd like everybody to sort of be a busybody a little bit to us. And I love dog walkers because they really call in a lot of stuff.
One of the other things is the community. We have all office space. And I thought if we could somehow get some money together to plant a garden, because we're lacking green things for people to do in LA, or whatever that word is. That we could have kids learn as young children to start growing things and producing things, canning things. My mother was very good at that, but I don't know how to do it very much anymore. So I'm working 2 jobs, and I think most of the people who have children are working 2 jobs, and they don't have any kids or anything. So I think we need to bring in some of that.
And I know the mayor's office is looking at some of the neighborhood resource teams to engender a drive to more community gardens across the city. I know I have at least 2 neighborhood officers working in community gardens on an annual basis.
Is there a way to find out about that? Get it on? Is there get on the map?
Yeah, the mayor's office should have someone that can talk about it, because the NRTs, the neighborhood resource teams, are the ones that are talking about bringing out gardens in abundance in the parks this year.
Sir?
What has been done to prevent a 911 call for help resulting in a homeowner being shot dead in his backyard?
What has been done to prevent
A 911 call for help resulting in a homeowner being shot dead in his backyard?
by the police?
By the police.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, I don't have a simple answer to a complex question of that nature. I can tell you that when officers are getting a call, it's a little bit like playing a sophisticated game of telephone. They are reliant that the information that they are receiving in real time is fact-specific, is comprehensive, and is not misleading, and will give them a sense of the gravitas or what is or isn't actually happening at these calls. We've seen not only in Madison, but other very sad commentaries across the country, where sometimes the story as it came into the 911 center is not completely fulfilled by the time it's dispatched to the officers. Once there, the officers basically have a 3-fold component once they get out of that squad car. First is officer safety. Second is try to maintain control of the scene and those subjects in it so that they can't sort of create more havoc for others besides themselves. And then the third is to strive for what I call the BPR, the best possible resolution. Gratefully, in less than 1% of the cases of police and citizen encounters across the country, about 0.666 is a fatal encounter. So the norm in terms of how we stage a call, the norm is that we arrive, we dialogue, we problem solve, we bring a sense of stability, and then we exercise what options we have in our midst and in the community to try to strive for the best possible resolution. Those options are going to get significantly curtailed, however, when the subject that they're trying to engage or dialogue with or problem solve with either arms themselves with an edged weapon or has a gun. Because then, I would be the first to say as they're training, their safety comes first and the safety of those around in that immediate environment. So, when I look over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I think those issues most prevalently have factored in my sort of sense of urgency that I think more and more people in our community are undiagnosed, undertreated, not treated at all, and my officers are being asked more and more to deal with people who are sicker, more chronically so, with fewer resources, and that's why we have to do more in terms of the mental health outreach.
I have a question back to the training, yes, maybe not training, but do police officers go through any kind of psychotherapy? I mean, I'm thinking before they become police officers, because I know an awful lot of people think of police officers as someone on a power trip. So they would like to try to not have that happen and know that they're healthy themselves.
Right. As part of the selection process, there's a lot of essays that get read and scored, and a lot of them deal with sort of the dynamics of looking at, are you the one that sort of shares our philosophy in terms of the social work component? And then beyond that, there is a psychological, if you will, a sort of an interview for 45 minutes. We have 2 UW psychiatrists who interview them. And then in the course of their careers, of course, they're doing a number of things that we're constantly sort of getting an index on. When someone goes to horrific events like a SIDS baby death, the sergeant is going to have a diffusing mechanism right away within an hour of the call, just to do an inventory, mental health check-in of where we're at. And many times that will lead to, okay, you're on leave. It's just too much to try to pick up from there. Then we'll have a facilitated critical incident stress debriefing. That's something that she knows all too much about because she facilitates a lot of those. We also have a very great group called peer support. Officers who have volunteered for extra training and basically act as an extra set of eyes and ears to ensure to sort of take a pulse on what's going on above and beyond what might be sheltered or cloistered from the supervisor's eyes. And if we had to perfect a profound case, then I also have the prerogative to order a fitness for duty assessment.
Gentleman in the back.
Last summer, I was a victim of a burglary and a tornado. And first, I'd like just to commend your officers on the wonderful job they did with the burglary and the tornado to the neighborhood safe after. But my one concern was revolves around the burglary. Shortly, a day or two after the call, I emailed case officers there was a product stolen and had no response back. I thought that might be normal. But then I heard the good news of the cost of marine in connection with multiple burglaries. So I decided to re-email the case officer the serial numbers to say if we get a match with them, we can found. Is that should I expect that I should have no communication back from my case officer? It would be nice to, I guess, have reassurance, hey, I passed the serial numbers off to the investigating team or the officer or whatever, but I actually had no response.
It's in the West District? Well, yes. One of the things that I would like to have seen at least, because frankly, you're the rare breed that actually keeps your model making serial numbers. That's terrific. That really helps us a great deal in terms of actually recovering or prosecuting cases for recovering stolen merchandise. So thank you. So no, from a customer focus, customer engagement standpoint, I would have liked to have heard a better story. I would have liked to have heard, if nothing else, an acknowledgement through email or a phone call to suggest that, hey, it didn't just go to the Bermuda Triangle. Somebody here at the West District got it. Was that your expectation? Absolutely. Sorry, sir.
And I guess if that is the expectation, is there some way I can communicate that to someone to say, hey, I don't feel like I'm getting any engagement or communication on my end?
Yes, there is obviously command staff personnel that is typically there during sort of those traditional hours of business operation. And if you even call in to Melody, who picks up the phone and does everything there, she will make sure that your phone call gets routed to the appropriate command staff to do a follow-up into that, because part of what we do is I want to be customer focused, and we did not deliver in that instance, so I apologize.
So I just wanted to say, I'm so glad I came out in the cold to hear you tonight, Mike.
Thank you.
I think you are an amazing
You're very gracious.
More things I want to say. One is the audience should know that you're married to the best physical education teacher in the entire Madison School District.
This is clearly getting away from me now. Jane must have told you to say
No,
that.
she didn't. The third thing I wanted to say is that I heard a tease that Channel 3 on the 10 o'clock news was having a segment on the heroin problem that we have in our area. So that might be something that people want to tune into.
Yes, it is, and it's been a good series.
Yeah.
That's been some really good insights. And you know, the fact of the matter is when we talk about these issues of our day, the heroin thing is so insidious that when, I think I neglected to tell you that out of those 159 people who have been brought back from death, what you'd be surprised to see is how many have done it more than once. You would sort of think that, okay, I got my epiphany the first time, and it sort of took. And unfortunately, it isn't. The other day, I think I actually saw something in the scratch pad, our SharePoint, where someone's boyfriend or girlfriend had their own Narcan kit that they purchased, and the citizen in a relationship administered it to someone else. So I don't care who's given the first aid, just let's get it out there. But the fact of the matter is that it has become so pervasive, and that's sort of the perversity of the Narcan, because but for the Narcan, if we had all those as registered deaths, I think we'd all be in the streets asking for some solutions and some questions.
Maybe I'm not just taking a question.
Sure.
That was all my preliminary.
Oh, you're good on time management.
See, I'm gonna have to pull out.
No, I'm
You do.
No, my question is that I know that you're in your prior position, you recruited and trained officers.
That was a good job.
And,
Not like this one.
I must say, that must be quite interesting to be leading the people you hired and trained. And how, has that been an asset?
So far, they haven't taken pitchforks on me yet. And, you know, the thing is that when we have 455 commission strength, and I think save for about 2 or 3 dozen, I've trained on, or we've trained together. And it makes the highs oh so much higher, but when they disappoint, it makes it all so much lower. So now disciplining the same people, it comes as a disappointment when they make bad mistakes. But yet, I can't tell you how blessed I am to have a workforce of this caliber. This community is something above and beyond what you're going to find being played across the country. And I know that sounds both self-serving, but the beauty of being 56 and don't have to worry about running for elections, I don't have to lie to anybody. These are really good people who really care a great deal. And the sort of things that folks don't see from those seats is that every day through the MPD website, or to me, or to letters, each day it gives you such pause for joy when you see the great acts of kindness, just kindness, that are replicated all throughout this city. I mean, literally, there was a time when a 7-year-old or 8-year-old had been scalded by her mom before Christmas and told that if she told anyone about it, there'd be no Christmas for her. So here she is in the burn unit at UW, and I hear one of my East units go out and ask other officers to cover their calls for an hour. You know what those folks did? Went to Target to buy everything on our list and brought it to UW Hospital. We have officers who are going on their own time in uniform out to Oakwood on New Year's Eve to dance with 80-year-olds. You might have been in that crowd. So I'm just saying, those kinds of things are happening all over the city. All over the city. You have a new officer. I was privy. I couldn't make it to the last part of the tea party, but she had a bunch of young girls here on the West District. I'm talking about Taylor, who had I was invited. I couldn't make it to all of it. But she had a whole bunch of kids from her neighborhood, all for a princess party. That's got to be a new one for me, a princess party. So, I mean, those are the sort of noble acts of gesture that you're not going to read about, but I get to see it every day. Every day.
I got some air traffic control to do here,
Oh.
so you ma'am, and then you, and you, and then you, sir. Look at that, stacking them up.
Wow.
Okay, I want to really reach out to you because you spoke on race and equity. I started putting that information out in July, and the Metalwood Association, they have supported me in that. I also get Gloria Myers from Prairie Hills, right? This information, and what we're doing in the Metalwood neighborhood is I'm reaching out to the people that is most that is affecting, talking about the statistics, asking what can make a change, what do we need, providing them with resources. And far as the kids in the neighborhood, the Madison School District has called me a couple of times to mediate between parents and kids. So what I'm doing is building relationships with the parents and the kids. After I build that relationship and the kids have write a contract saying they won't be fighting, they won't be engaging in certain activities, I get an understanding from the parents. If these kids do that, if they do that at the Metalwood Library or at the center, can we form a list? And then with that list, the librarian is able to call the parents, and therefore the kids, the parents get involved other than the police. And so for the lady that's saying she had problems with kids, I don't know if she lived in the Metalwood area, but that would be some kind of idea. And if you would like to sit in and listen to some of our discussions on race and equity, I'll give you my information, and you can come in and sit in.
Thank you. Hi, I'm with the Stock Creek neighborhood. A couple of miscellaneous items first. Dane County Communitygardens.org has a listing of the community gardens in Dane County, most of which are in Madison.
Thank you.
The COPS program, I have to say my daughter has really enjoyed that. It's nice to have her excited about maybe some classes.
So now you're on the hook. You have to tell everybody what the COPS program is.
So that's when a police officer comes into the school and talks about what's happening in our communities. And so she would come home and tell me about marijuana or e-cigarettes or these other things that are going on, gangs, and how young some of the kids are. She's in 5th grade. She was really taken with the officer. So one of my questions, our neighborhood was recently hit with some really horrible things, and I understand there were some armed robberies at the same time. And so we were just wondering, you know.
We got the armed robbery guy. That part we got. Now we're working on these insidious people that will spread such violent hate.
Yes. So just wondering kind of how you're going about that, if there's extra patrols and anything that the neighbors could do that I would take back to our association.
Well, of course, it was almost incredible to me when my phone started blowing up on Saturday morning at 7:20. I thought it was so darn cold, nobody would venture out until at least noon. And then over time, as people started coming out and surveying the havoc that had been wreaked on their neighborhoods, on their homes, on their cars, on their mailboxes. And of course, what we're talking about was a number of anti-Semitic, anti-African American, just crude, vulgar body part references. It's just horrific, and it's pretty much far west, and so that would have been in that area. What we're always asking is that people sort of be thy brothers or sisters keeper and report all those things to us in real time. I think so many people presume that that's, again, being sort of a busybody. I think that's actually being very conscientious and caring about the neighborhood and the dynamics of what's taking place in that neighborhood. All told, I think we're up to 38 counts of vandalism stretching on the west side. We have some very excellent leads, both forensically and from some camera captures and from a witness or two that might give way. And of course, given what we think is the age group of this group, We're monitoring social media like a hawk. We've had detectives working since Saturday morning at 9 a.m. when the first calls came in. So I certainly hope that we can speak resoundingly to that in the not so distant future. I am, of course, working with and meeting with various constituent groups to assure them that we have doubled our efforts down on this. I think we all, as a community, should be fearful of a group or groups that could be so vile, and we should all be obviously condemning them with the highest crescendo in our voices to assume that that kind of behavior would be tolerated. It's not happening. So we're going to get some arrested on this. And I want to be clear, their behavior is nothing short of hateful. When and if our investigation should reflect that innocent people and their property were targeted owing to their religion, owing to their race, then we will also charge them statutorily with a penalty enhancer for hate crime. But it's not quite soup yet. Right now, it looks to be a bunch of random mayhem. But if we do find that correlation, that nexus, rest assured, the community will be heard in the charging instrument that will be going in a criminal complaint.
Can you talk a little bit, we have a security system. Can you talk a little bit whether a security system is beneficial? Ours goes to our neighbor and then to the police department.
I personally think any sort of things you do is called CIPDED. It's crime prevention through environmental design. I really like anything you can do within the realms of reasonable affordability to try to make your home safer. Typically what we see, quite frankly, is that a lot of the objects or targets of a lot of these thefts from autos and or burglaries, we have some that are very nefarious in terms of kicking down the door or being somewhat sophisticated, but by and large, they're testing doors, they're seeing open garage doors, they're seeing unlocked cars. So we have to do a better job of sort of taking self-help measures. How do you feel about dogs?
I love dogs.
I do too.
My husband's not a dog person. So
Well, I will just say in all my years, and again, I'm not going to where everybody can find it, I never took a burglary at a house that had a dog that would bark at the sound of a noise inside. Those dark, maybe we can buy an app for that and then simulate it periodically. But no, I think anything you can find or muster within a reasonable price point.
we have security lights all around.
Great.
that go on.
That's great.
But I put in the security system a few years ago because I just felt like I wanted to know if somebody tried breaking the house at night when I was sleeping.
Well, and the other thing is too, is that the other things that, you know, I got called to Westmoreland one time for a death investigation. As I said, the neighbors all flocked once they saw the squad car there. And the neighbors said, oh, who knew? I said, well, you guys, there's at least 4 days worth of papers sitting on the front stoop. Somebody should have called because that's out of the ordinary. We could have checked, I'm not saying that would have meant a difference in this case, but the little things like that that we just take for granted and act upon, that's actionable intelligence.
One other part. When we leave town,
Yep.
should we call the police station, let them know that we're going, so if there are...
Captain, that's your protocol. I think he does want that.
Yeah, you can either call or you can email it to us through our website. And whenever I get those, I share that with the officers that work that area to see their...
I just figured like if the call comes in, we're overdone.
Now, just so you know, I'm not Maple Bluff. I'm not going in and checking the cat litter and all the other stuff. We'll drive by and check the house. Okay?
Chief, I'm Jim Roseberg. I've lived in Meadowood for 38 years now, and I just want to tell you that I go back to the days of Bruce Weatherly. In my estimation, you are the best we've ever had.
Very kind. I got to tell you, to be honest with you, Pat and Jim, I'm going to dine you out here. Never knew these people until I got back from New Year's. Went down to Nashville to see my beloved Notre Dame actually win a game. And came back early Friday night, and I made the mistake of opening an email from your better half. And then, according to my wife, 7 o'clock the next day, she says, you tossed and turned like a fish that's been caught and flopping on the pier. What was your deal? I said, this Pat woman gave me no Guys, you've all been to in-service. Was this letter invoked? Every one of my 455 officers and civilians, which is another 100, I haven't used your last name. But I've said, we cannot be asleep at the wheel, because these are real people living in Meadowood, 38 years, raised all their kids here, and now they're scared. They're really palpably scared. And I sometimes think that I'm sort of old school, that for every person that actually takes and makes the time and effort to write an email and leave points of contact, or drop me a line in the mail, that there's probably 40 or 50 behind Pat who had the thought but just didn't see it through. And what I told my officers is that this is our teachable moment. This happened to be the West District in this one instance. But every district has a Pat and Jim. And we cannot minimize, discount, or rationalize that they're an outlier, that they're an anomaly. And then we're doing a pretty good job. Just look at the national statistics. I don't want to look at the national statistics in a vacuum. If we can't deal with the perceptions of fear, then we are failing you on many levels. And at the end of the day, when we had a very nice visit, I was chagrined though, because Pat and Jim said, you know, we're at a crossroads, Chief. We're thinking of either selling or purchasing a gun. And I said, well, folks, you know, that really hurts my heart like you don't know. I said, obviously, you're adults. You'll make the right decision. If you do get a gun, I just want you to secure it properly, because I know you probably have grandkids and kids home. I'm not going there. It's your prerogative. But in all of these drive-bys or burglaries, please understand, most of them have not been a stranger to another stranger's home. It's not been like that. These home invasions typically are a drug ring, or someone who has drugs and wants to get their loot or their drugs. It isn't as easy as Pat and Jim in Meadowood. And in terms of the decision to sell, golly, we need the bedrock to stay. She's ultimately, if Jim and Pat are going to ultimately do what's best for their immediate situation, I respect that. But I got to tell you, it is with a heavy heart, as someone who grew up in Madison. Some of you people are probably more, but I did go to Madison High School, Madison West. I'll get more hate mail for that in the morning. But do you know how it hurts my heart now to drive down Raymond Road? What happened? What happened? Yeah. Everybody understand what this concept was? I am playing, and he understands, I am playing, you know, I had to go to this, and the only reason I made that reference is that I have nieces now that are little. And they had to take me to Chuck E. Cheese. Thank God they have beer at Chuck E. Cheese. So I'm going to this, and I'm like, whoa, I'm way overstimulated here. And so she wanted to play this game where you put in some coin tokens, and you get stuff back to get junk back. So she's playing this game where this rodent puts his head up, and you try to whack him with this big cleaver here, like a mallet. And I'm like, I had this epiphany, and I only had 2 beers. I had this epiphany, and like, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm playing the adult version of whack-a-mole, because when we were bearing down on Allied and concentrating a lot of our resources and time and attention, that garden hose sort of constricted on Allied, and we sprung leaks. And that's part of my concern about the neighborhoods now more than ever, is that I cannot continue to let the neighborhood suffer. Anybody who's ever heard me speak once know that when people ask me what the prognosis is for the future of Madison, it's really being played out in two different labs. The first lab is the Madison Metropolitan School District. 27,000 students who increasingly, I hope the statistics are getting better. I'm convinced that the superintendent is doing everything in her power, but they don't have great numbers when it comes to high school graduation rates for children of color. And the school scores are saying. And there are issues. You know, when you have a community of over 2,000 people come together for 8 hours a day, students, faculty, staff, why wouldn't you be like a small little Mount Orb or somebody else that has all the microcosm of all the other society ills? They do. They have domestic violence, they have gangs, they have drugs, they have it all. And those poor educational resource officers, one per high school, I gotta tell you something, folks, that's not the gravy train job in the MPD. Usually when one of those positions opens up, it gets close to having us have to order someone to do it. That Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p., they're not fooled by that. We can't work that bait and switch anymore. It is a lot of jobs without backup. So that's where one thing's like. And by the way, one of the things that I commend the district is the BEP. I mean, philosophically, BEP, the Behavior Education Plan, is such that the district is trying a new tack to gain this fall, wherein the police are sort of involved in formally dealing with the child in terms of the traditional default mechanism only as a case of last resort. Through peer networking, through mediation, the schools are trying to do anything and everything they can to avoid suspension, avoid expulsions, and to avoid the police entanglement, believing, as I do, that when kids aren't suspended, they're in school. And they're more likely to learn, theoretically. And the other thing is that obviously we want to avoid stigmatizing youth by labeling them as being charged with crime. We want to postpone that as often as we can. My only sort of caveat, and I've made it known to the superintendent, is I'm all for BEP unless or until it compromises safety at our schools. So you're on notice. You keep my educational resource officer in the loop in real time as part of your holistic healing. But I don't want officers only called when it's clean up on aisle 6, it's time to do a ticket, it's time to make an arrest, it's time to escort somebody home. That's not what I want the role of police to be looked at in the high school. So that's the one domain. The other domain for me is how are we doing in our neighborhoods? Now, when I began April 30th, I was cuckoo over Cocoa Puffs when it comes to neighborhood officers. But I think that's where we're at our best, quite frankly, when we can be relational, when we don't have to constantly be looking at calls for service. That's when I think when we're at our optimal best. So at one time, at our height, we had as many as 18 neighborhood officers. And over time, because of all the drains for resources and calls for service going out of the roof, it went down to 11. So when we went into the budgetary process, I told my assistant chiefs, Chief Gaber, who's here tonight, the West District is in his domain along with the South District. I said, Chief, I really want to front load this with 5 neighborhood officers, 1 for each district. And I think I can defend it because I had sent out a survey to each captain and I said, you know what? Do you have neighborhoods that are sort of on the cusp? They could go one way or another, sort of percolating on slow boil. And I think I can get less than 6 neighborhoods per capita. Some as high as 8. So let's do the math. I'm a man of humanities, so I'm not going to be really good at this. We started out with 120 plus neighborhoods. Okay? We have 5 districts, and they all say they have at least 6 troubled areas. That's another 30. So when you're telling me that literally a quarter of this city's neighborhoods, or a third, coming up to a third, if you count what we already have, that's problematic for me. So that's why in the midst of, and I see that, Alderman, thank you for your support. In a very tight, austere budget, I was delighted beyond belief to see that the council and the mayor could come to terms with the fact that this is something that was a mainstay, something that we need very much now, and we can't play from behind, and which I feel like we're doing a little bit now.
Okay, so I have 2 in the queue, and then I just saw 2 more hands go up. We are running a little past the time, but we always do. So
Quit looking at me like
if
that.
the chief is willing to go a bit longer, it looks like we'll have about 4 questions.
All right.
Yes? Okay. So, I've lost it already. No. I'm sorry.
I just want to say, there was a burglary in our neighborhood 2 doors down, and one of the things that I thought you did that was so positive, that the officers came around, there were a whole bunch of policemen in our neighborhood, they all came around to our different houses and knocked on the door, told us about the burglary, and told us what we could do to prevent them. And I like that we were notified. Instead of just like, don't tell them because we don't want them to know there's trouble in the neighborhood. I'd rather know, and I really appreciated that.
And I love that response because I think you guys have gotten that down to a fairly sophisticated art form, so keep it up. Keep it up. Thank you, that's great feedback. The other day someone said too, I learned from all these gatherings, someone said, I tried to call the West District to say thank you for what you're doing, and I couldn't find the West District in a phone book. And so today I said, okay. I looked at my own department for 15 minutes. No one of my X generation knows what a phone book is. I'm still researching it to see if we can find a phone book, because it should have your number on it if you don't.
They gave us a card.
They gave you business cards and incident sheets? Good.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to all the neighborhood people that are here, association and our neighborhood watch. Because he has the contact with the officer, nobody else is calling, and then that goes out immediately to us if you're involved in the neighborhood watch. And I think part of that is related to that Lorraine Drive, what cars in the neighborhood, here's the description, here's the license, and be glad if you live by nosy neighbors and older people. We also, something else we do just within our block, and we've had block captains, is I have all the information and contacts for 9 houses in our area. And with alarms, it's really made it more difficult. But, you know, so I don't think we call the police, but when we go, we email each other and say, where do we go, and that kind of thing. Really the strong neighborhood associations.
Those are so integral, the associations and the block, the neighborhood watches. Community policing to me is fundamentally this. It starts from the initial predicate is cops can't go it alone. We cannot do this by ourselves. There may have been a time when we were resource rich and you could point us to go handle that and we could go and handle it and clean up and you never have to get your hands dirty, but those days are gone. We cannot do it without you. So how? How do we go about doing community-based policing? Well, it starts, quite frankly, I'm constantly in the business of earning trust. If we can't create trust bonds with our constituent base, then we don't get to a very critical element, which is we need to have partnerships forward with these neighborhood associations, with our neighborhood watch programs. Only if we have trust can we get partnerships. Once we have those 2 component parts in, then we can get down to the business of real grassroots problem solving. Looking beyond the pale of what's the default. I don't want our default response to be writing tickets and arresting everybody. That's to me sort of the kicking the can down the road. You're just buying time. So we have to do some radically different things too in terms of some of those issues.
It was you, sir, and then Rick.
Yeah, you said, comment and question. Living in the neighborhood over, I would say, the last 20 years, we used to have a lot of police officers that actually lived in that. And they pretty much all left. A few that I talked to left for the same reasons everybody else is thinking about it. Are there any of your officers still live in this area?
Well, I believe there are quite a few yet, but.
Okay, well, maybe some have been replaced. And are you Madison?
Yes, I'm on the west side. I have to tell you, I'm along my element is far west side though. I was 4314 Critchell Terrace and then 526 Caldy Place. So that was sort of the West Moreland, Sunset Hills kind of guy.
I think it's a great plus for us to have police officers. There's a sense of safety, there's a sense of community. And so
I don't disagree, although I would never suggest for a minute the beauty of your Madison cops. You don't have a mercenary for hire. You have people that care deeply.
I just wanted to ask, what is the crime rate in, for instance, the Meadowood neighborhood compared to other neighborhoods in Madison? You know, like we end up being, I think, really focused here, and it's difficult to have some sort of perspective, whether that's by incident per capita or whatever.
Well, it's actually pretty challenging for us to pull true crime data by that discrete neighborhood location. We can use incident data, which is the incidents we go to, you know, which isn't a perfect measure because a lot of incidents we go to are not crimes, or not even things that are suggestive of public safety issues. But clearly the sort of the Balsam Russet area from Whitney over a couple of blocks has a higher level of calls for service than the surrounding area does. I don't have the numbers at the tip of my brain, but it was enough for us to make a shift this year to put a full-time neighborhood officer in. So it is more active in the area of incidents.
And that is one of the determinants of who gets a neighborhood officer, is that sort of population density coupled with high calls for service volume.
There's one more in the back of the red shirt.
Thank you. So for everybody, I'm Matt Butler, I'm the county supervisor. I just wanted to hit on a couple of points that were raised earlier. Question about the community gardens. One thing I will tell you, besides the website, is Meadowood has a garden. It's had one for a bunch of years now. It has a plot dedicated for children in the area, students, and it's been done well. But it's one of those things, and this leads into another point about a lot of the folks in here, when you said, you know, what's happening on Raymond Road. You know, this has obviously become an area that you take 2 steps forward and sometimes you take 1 step back. But it's just not one of those things where you say, okay, we fix things and wipe our hands, pat ourselves on the back, and we're done. It's just, this is a vigilant place. And unfortunately, I know a lot of you folks, you didn't have to put up with that, and it's a whole new world. And it's been that way for a long time now. And, you know, so we just have to keep working at it. And I know sometimes that's, you know, not the best thing, but I think police officers do a great thing. I just wanted to say, back to the jail, or sorry, because actually that's what I was going to say in a second. There is another garden right on the Hammersley.
There's a garden on
Right.
and then there's the Hammersley garden right off of
Right, there's 2, and that's been tough to do to get people involved and stay involved. So, and we lost a lot of funding because the Community Action Coalition was helping us, and they pulled out, and that we were lucky to get some city funding, and the county wasn't able to put anything in. So that's something we're looking for next year to really beef up again. But we are still know that that's a great help to the area. And I just wanted to touch on, when we talk about mental health, I really applaud your adding the mental health officers. The biggest thing we wanted with the jail is to do something about the top 2 floors of the city county building, which are dangerous. I think that's what a lot of folks know. And that's a stressful situation to, obviously the officers, the county officers that have to watch the folks up there, and I just don't want to, none of us want to see something really tragic happen, because it's so old that we literally can't get parts for the site itself. So part of our whole, the sheriff's issue with jail was to get rid of that situation and to create mental health beds. That's the other problem we just don't have. And I think somehow our conversation got kind of switched. And I don't want to dwell because everybody, like Officer said, we're over time anyway. So those are the two things. I did hear something in other conversations about community officers, sort of on a negative, and I disagree with it, but I heard it from people said, oh, now there's police in my neighborhood all the time. And you know, the community's like, why are they in my neighborhoods? And people feel like they're being targeted. And I think it's always, you know, there's two sides of the coin. You know,
Sure, can I just, I'm going to pick on someone on that last one as a follow-up. Caleb, what's your neighborhood?
Hammersley, Teresa Terrace, Parkhead, Park Ridge.
You're a living saint. What's your hours?
They vary a lot depending on there's things going on in the community, or bad meetings, or different projects.
But, okay, you're not working 60 hours or 70 like me. What are you working typically? Your hours could be.
6 on, 3 off, so 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. is my kind of standard default shift.
Yeah, one of the things that goes to these neighborhood issues is that this sense of this oppressive, occupying force really sticks in my craw. Because that is just not the reality of what's being offered here. Frankly, it is not. And as was anybody else's prerogative right, when we say high incidence of contact, contact in and of itself does not necessarily mean a negative contact. It can be very positive. The other thing is that, you know, out of our neighborhoods, I gotta tell you folks, based on those suppositions, we crunched numbers for 17 to 26-year-old arrests. I mean, the top 25 addresses, none of them are in any of our neighborhoods. I can tell you where the top 10 are. Drum roll, please, no. East Town, West Town. The 2 bus exchanges, west and south. The 4 high schools, and we'll just say 2 prominent discount centers. Walmart. So, those are where most of our adverse contacts are happening. And I can guarantee you, we're not proactively omnipotent, and we're there as these things are happening. By far, the majority are called in by a third party, whether it's a bus driver, a merchant, you name it, but we're not going unless that 911 call has been activated. Once there, then we have to make an objective discussion of, do we have articulable suspicion? Do we have probable cause? And then go from there. So what we do find coming away from this experience, though, is that I had some poor statistician go through all of those bases of those misdemeanor citations, those city ordinances, and those arrest laws. What we did find was that when you look at where those folks are calling home, it is the neighborhoods. The heat maps are huge. So to say that we're oppressing the neighborhoods is a little bit of a misnomer. We are being called to a lot of places, and then those folks who are adversely impacted, arrested or ticketed, they are claiming the neighborhoods as home. That's the reality.
And we have one last question, sir.
Just to sort of touch on what the woman said earlier about the elephants in the room, and then a gentleman's further comments on them. I just, wanted to point out that you can download the race equity report in PDF on the internet, and there are some useful definitions in there about disparity versus disproportionality. One of the interesting things, you sort of brought up the school prison pipeline a little bit in your answer to the woman who brought up the problem of racial disparity, at least in terms of the reparative courts. And then just now, kind of, just a moment ago, you mentioned also something about presence in the schools. And so I'm wondering, I see, for instance, that the rate of students who are expelled or suspended for incidents unrelated to weapons or drugs, at least in 2010, was 15 times higher than that of whites. So I'm wondering what the police department's role is in that sort of action, and then even in the disproportionality in juvenile detentions and such. And I just wanted to point out too that there's 25% black unemployment, and I do think that as well as a number of these other disparities, if you're going to ignore that we are the worst county in these disparities in the worst state in the country, I don't know that you're looking at the problem in the lightest way and in the best way, the most helpful way. It's going to actually, make some solutions happen. We can work on ourselves individually, partly by dealing with our own racism and self-hatred for other reasons, but we've got to, take on these things as a society as well. So, if you could, yeah.
Sure. The statistic I just gave about those 10 big places where we're having adverse consequences or impact, that was through August 31st. I specifically told them to stop the numbers there because I want to see what impact that has going through this school year, because I do want to see if in fact the suspension and expulsion rates do come down with our taking a less of a profile. I will say that as it applies to suspensions and expulsions, those are administrative decisions made by the school. Typically we're involved because if there's been a fight, if it's sort of conduct, battery, whatever the case may be, we may be ultimately that mechanism which gets a process started. But the decision to actually suspend or expel is done on independent parameters by the school and in cooperation with the school board guidelines. So now that we have that, it'll be interesting and I hope encouraging to see whether those numbers will come down to some extent. Because our role shouldn't be that of traditional enforcement. I want more. As a matter of fact, I see sort of in the school context, I think that one woman was kind enough to say that she really liked what we're doing in elementary school, K through 5. And then I've had principals tell me that they can't imagine what their school would be like without having that sort of backstop, that safety net, that colleague, if you will, dealing with some very sophisticated and complicated societal issues at high school. But where the biggest gap to me in this whole thing is we've got nothing at the middle school. And frankly, I actually think that if I had my druthers, if the school wanted to renegotiate a contract, I'd rather see us at the middle school, and you could probably farm out the rest that they're doing at the high school. But you're right, it's complex, many layers to this onion. We have a role. We're not off the hook. We have to continually do that self-assessment and hear from people about that. But we can only own which we can own. So to your point about the grander issues of poverty or the education system, which is becoming fulfilling for everyone to realize, you're right, everybody's got a stake in it, but it can't be just put on the police, and what are you not doing? Anyway, was that the last one?
It was.
Thank you so much for staying.